Hello, and welcome to another video. Today I've got a new Commander video for you. This is coming out a bit closer to my last Commander video than I normally do, but we are kind of in a holding pattern right now, just waiting for the new Magic set to come out. And when I had polled you all on what to do for my last Commander video, which Progenitus ended up winning, this one came in as a very close second. So I wanted to make sure to get this one out for you as well. So yeah, I am really excited to give you a tour through this Zur the Enchanter Commander deck. This is an Esper deck with a heavy enchantment theme and a bit of a cycling theme that you will see as we go through. But the overall plan for this deck is to try and cast Zur as early as possible, load him up with a lot of enchantments, and then swing on through for a bunch of commander damage. And we can talk about that a bit more as we go through card by card. But let's first start out with our commander. We've got Zur the Enchanter. He is 1 white, blue, black for a 1/4 legendary human wizard with flying. And whenever he attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So we absolutely want Zur to be attacking as much as possible so that we can continue to tutor for new enchantments. And next we will take a look at the remaining creatures in the deck, of which there really aren't very many, especially for me. But let's take a look through those now. First up, we have Bruna, Light of Alabaster. She is 3 white, white, blue for a 5/5 angel with flying and vigilance. Whenever she attacks or blocks, you may attach to it any number of auras on the battlefield, and you may put onto the battlefield attached to it any number of aura cards that could enchant it from your graveyard and or hand. Obviously a very powerful creature here that can just vacuum up all of your auras, including from the graveyard and your hand. So definitely a scary creature to be facing down on the battlefield, and a good way to get back any auras that have made their way to your graveyard. Luris of the Dream Den is 1 and hybrid white black, hybrid white black for a 3/2 cat nightmare. It has companion, which we are ignoring. It has lifelink. And once during each of your turns, you may cast a permanent with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. Again, a great way to fish some enchantments back from the graveyard. Sun Titan is 4 white for a 6/6 giant with vigilance. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, continuing on the same theme here, Monk Idealist, 2 and a white for a 2/2 cleric. When it enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Heliod's Pilgrim is 2 and a white for a 1/2 human cleric. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an aura card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Rune-Scarred Demon is 5 black for a 6/6 demon with flying. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is a really useful tutor that can get anything from your library. Shoreline Ranger is 5 and a blue for a 3/4 bird soldier with flying, but more importantly has island cycling for 2. Eternal Dragon is 5 white for a 5/5 dragon spirit with flying. For 3 white, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand, but only during your upkeep. And it has plane cycling for 2. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 mana for a 2/2 golem. When it enters the battlefield, you may fetch a basic land card from your library and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And when it dies, you may draw a card. Gilded Drake is 1 and a blue for a 3/3 Drake with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can exchange control of it for target creature target opponent controls, or sacrifice Gilded Drake. So this is a bit tricky. You get to steal one of your opponent's creatures, and then there are ways in here to get your Gilded Drake back without returning the creature that you stole. So that is kind of fun. Clever Impersonator is 2 blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter. And you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. And this is the last creature in the deck. There is technically one more, but it is one of the Theros gods, and for this I am just treating it as an enchantment since that is what it is most of the time. So yeah, the creatures are done, let's now take a look at the single Planeswalker that is in the deck. So for our Planeswalker, we've got Fencer the Sojourner. He is 3 white-blue for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. His +2 is exile target permanent you own and return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. -1, creatures are unblockable this turn. And the ultimate is -8. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. So this first ability is definitely very useful for blinking your own permanents to re-trigger them, or choosing a different creature for an aura to attach to. And since you are targeting a permanent you own rather than control, you can target your Gilded Drake if it's under an opponent's control. And that is all for the Planeswalkers. Let's move right along to look at the enchantments. Okay, so I'm going to start out by looking at just the regular enchantments first, and then all of the auras are grouped together in the second half of this section. So starting out with Greater Auramancy, it is 1 and a white for an enchantment. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, and enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. This is Copy Enchantment, and just like it says, for 2 and a blue, it enters as a copy of any enchantment that is on the battlefield. Estrid's Invocation is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any enchantment you control, and you may blink it at the beginning of your upkeep. Mirror Maid is 1 blue for an enchantment that can enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Astral Slide is 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a player cycles a card, you may blink one of your creatures. So this is kind of a payoff for all of that cycling in this deck. It is really useful to re-trigger the creatures, which are basically enchantment tutors, or otherwise respond to removal or bad combat or something like that. Astral Drift is pretty much the same thing, but with cycling itself. It is 2 and a white for an enchantment, with cycling for 2 and a white. Whenever you cycle Astral Drift or cycle another card while Astral Drift is on the battlefield, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah. And they both target any creature. Propaganda is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. Ghostly Prison is the same thing. It is 2 and a white for an enchantment. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature that's attacking you. Sphere of Safety is 4 and a white for an enchantment. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. And then we've got a number of O-ring effects in here. Suspension Field is 1 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target creature with toughness 3 or greater until Suspension Field leaves the battlefield. Stasis Snare is 1 white for an enchantment with flash. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Stasis Snare leaves the battlefield. Detention Sphere is 1 white-blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent not named Detention Sphere, and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. When Detention Sphere leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Cast Out is 3 and a white for an enchantment with flash. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. And cycling for a single white. And finally, Oblivion Ring is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile another target non-land permanent. And when Oblivion Ring leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So here is our enchantment creature, Thassa, God of the Sea. It is 2 and a blue for a 5/5 god with indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1, and for 1 and a blue, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Rhystic Study is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. And you better be ready to ask them every single time. Dictative Crucifix is 1 blue for an enchantment with flash. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Alright, and now we are through to the auras. We are starting with Staggering Insight. White, blue for a creature aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. Has lifelink. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Steel of the Godhead. 2 hybrid white-blue for a creature aura. As long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and is unblockable. Daybreak Coronet is white for an aura that has to enchant a creature with another aura attached to it. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3, has first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. All That Glitters is 1 and a white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and/or enchantment you control. Ethereal Armor is white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control and has first strike. Battle Mastery is 2 and a white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature has double strike. Sleeper's Robe is blue-black for a creature aura. Enchanted creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and/or black creatures, which I think is just the fear keyword now. And then whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. And then we've got a few of these auras that are intended for opponents' creatures. We've got Arrest, which is 2 and a white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Lawmage's Binding is 1 white-blue for a creature aura with flash. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. Cage of Hands is 2 and a white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and for 1 and a white you can return Cage of Hands to its owner's hand. Darksteel Mutation is 1 and a white for a creature aura. Enchanted creature is a 0/1 insect, artifact creature with indestructible, and loses all other abilities. And this is our last aura and our last enchantment overall. Next up, we are on to artifacts. First up, we've got some equipment, starting with Swiftfoot Boots. It is 2 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Equip 1. Lightning Greaves is 2 for an equipment. Equipped creature has haste and shroud. Equip 0. Soul Ring is 1 for an artifact that taps to add 2 colorless mana. Chromatic Lantern is 3 for an artifact. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and Chromatic Lantern itself can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Elixir of Immortality is 1 for an artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it to gain 5 life, and then shuffle Elixir of Immortality and your graveyard into your library. This is a great way to reinfuse some of those auras that have made their way into the graveyard back into your library so that you can search for them again. And that is our final artifact. Next up are the instants and sorceries. So in this section, we are definitely going to be seeing a lot of cycling. Just something to keep in mind for Astral Slide and Astral Drift. Starting out with Decree of Justice. It is XX2 white for a sorcery with cycling for 2 and a white. Put X for 4 White Angel creature tokens with flying into play, or when you cycle Decree of Justice, you may pay X. If you do, put X 1/1 White Soldier creature tokens into play. Hieroglyphic Illumination is 3 and a blue for an instant with cycling blue. Draw 2 cards. Teferi's Protection is 2 and a white for an instant. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you have protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and then you exile to Fairy's Protection. Swords to Plowshares is white for an instant. Exile target creature, and its controller gains life equal to its power. Path to Exile is white for an instant. Exile target creature, then its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Radiant's Judgment is 2 and a white for an instant, with cycling 2. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Forsake the Worldly is 2 and a white for an instant, with cycling 2. Exile target artifact or enchantment. Rescind is 1 blue for an instant, with cycling 2. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Supreme Verdict, 1 white for a sorcery that can't be countered. Destroy all creatures. Damnation is 2 black for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Decree of Pain is 6 black for a sorcery, with cycling for 3 black. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. When you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. And then some counter spells. Neutralize is 1 blue for an instant, with cycling 2. Counter target spell. Traumatic Visions is 3 blue for an instant, with basic land cycling for 1 and a blue. Counter target spell. Dovin's Veto is white for an instant that can't be countered. Counter target non-creature spell. Moving on to some tutors. We've got Idyllic Tutor, which is 2 and a white for a sorcery that tutors up an enchantment to your hand. Savine's Reclamation is 2 and a white for a sorcery, with flashback for 4 and a white. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from the graveyard, you may copy this spell and choose new targets for the copy. We are probably just getting enchantments with this. Replenish is 3 and a white for a sorcery. Return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to play. So Zur is probably getting really big when this happens. And our last spell, Demonic Tutor, is 1 and a black for a sorcery. Search your library for any card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So our final section here is land. Starting with Command Tower, which taps to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Rafine's Tower is a Plains Island swamp with cycling 3 that enters the battlefield tapped. Arcane Sanctum enters tapped and taps for white, blue, or black. Tainted Isle taps for a colorless, or taps for a blue or a black if you control a swamp. Drowned Catacomb enters tapped unless you control an island or swamp, and taps for a blue or black. Temple of Deceit enters tapped. When it enters, you scry 1, and it taps for blue or black. Morphic Pond enters tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and it taps to add black or blue. Fetid Pools is an island swamp with cycling 2 that enters tapped. Tainted Field is the white-black version of the Tainted Land we saw before. Watery Grave is an island swamp that enters tapped unless you pay 2 life. Glacial Fortress enters tapped unless you control a plains or island, and taps for a white or blue. Temple of Enlightenment, same as the temple that we saw before, except for white or blue. Sea of Clouds enters tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, and taps for a white or blue. Prairie Stream is a plains island that enters tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Hallowed Fountain is the white-blue shockland that we saw before. Secluded Steppe enters tapped, taps for a white, and cycles for a white. Drifting Meadow is the same thing, except it cycles for 2. Remote Isle is the blue version of that. Lonely Sandbar is the same thing, but cycles for blue. Baron Moor is the same thing in black. Polluted Mire is the black land that cycles for 2. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, makes everything a swamp. Ash Barrens taps for a colorless and has basic land cycling 1. Hall of Heliod's Generosity taps for a colorless, or you can pay 1 white tap to put a target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. Homeward Path taps for a colorless, or tap, each player gains control of all creatures they own. Again, a way to get that Gilded Drake back. Reliquary Tower taps for a colorless, and you have no maximum hand size. Temple of the False God will tap to add 2 colorless, but only if you control 5 or more lands. Polluted Delta is our island swamp fetch land. Flooded Strand is the Plains Island fetch land. Esper Panorama taps for a colorless, or fetches a Plains Island or swamp. And everything else is just a basic land, so we can flip through those real quick. There we have it. I really appreciate you joining me today for a tour of this Zur the Enchanter Commander deck. Now I am curious to know if this is a commander that you have built around or that you have played against. Let me know down in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, I would absolutely love it if you would give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll be back with new Magic the Gathering ASMR videos every Monday and Friday. Your support truly means the world to me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.